Good evening, everyone. Good evening. It's your host, Danny Dhaiphong, and I am back for another live stream. As you can see, I am joined by a very special guest, Andrei Martyanov. He is a military and geopolitical analyst. His YouTube channel can be found in the video description. He covers all things SMO, Russia's SMO, plus much, much more. He's written several books. Hello, Andrei. How are you doing this evening?
Hi, Danny. Pleasure to be here.
Thanks so much for taking the time out. So everyone, as you're watching, please do hit that like button. That is how you get more viewers here on the stream. Also, be sure to hit the subscribe button if you are new to this channel. And of course, you can not only find Andrei's YouTube channel in the video description, but all the places and all the ways that you can support me here on this channel: Patreon, Substack, YouTube, PayPal, Buy Me a Coffee, and more. All right, Andrei, with all of that now out of the way, let's get started because it's been quite a busy period in the realm of the special military operation. So let's begin with the latest development, and that is the downed Russian plane that was carrying upwards of 65 prisoners of war, Ukrainian prisoners of war. Everyone in the plane was killed. This happened in the Belgorod region as they were seeking to cross the border to exchange these prisoners. Russia's foreign ministry says that Ukraine knew that there were prisoners on this plane and that they had been informed that the exchange was going to take place later at that afternoon of the 24th. Ukraine says absolutely not. That is not what's happened. And it's Russia now, and BBC is reporting that it is Russia who risked the lives in the downed plane. Now, Andrei, earlier in so this is the BBC report, but earlier in the day, as this news was being reported in the Western mainstream media, we were actually told, and BBC actually acknowledges, that Ukrainian intelligence said it had not been told to ensure safe airspace on previous occasions. But before that, in the New York Times, there was indications that Ukraine was being very close to the chest about this, not really saying much about what happened, while Russia claims and strongly asserts that Ukraine actually downed the plane. So can you give viewers here some context about what happened? Why is this important?
Well, it is important only from the humanitarian point of view, but you have to keep in mind constantly that pretty much anything which comes out of the corporate media, especially from the British BS Corporation, normal people do not work there. These are people who have no integrity, no morals, and so they will report whatever is told to them, and they will just, what. So obviously the Ukrainian side knew what was going on. They knew that exchange was already settled. And as the result, what most likely would happen, they pulled in either the Iris-T, but again, Iris-T is basically sidewinder on the chassis, and it has the range up to 40 kilometers. Or maybe they SAM-PT, which is the Aster family French air defense complex. It has a much larger, longer range. It's about 100 kilometers. So the distance between Belgorod and Kharkov, this area, is direct, and it is 70 kilometers. So there actually the salvo was even more to the north of Kharkov, which is even closer to the border with Russia and to the Belgorod proper. So they knew it, they shut it down. They did it for the picture. And again, as I already stated, take any journalist from New York Times, BBC, Deutsche Welle, and they will, just approve just about killing just anything Russian, children, people, they don't care. So, and that was precisely the reason for the only thing they can do now, whatever is left of the military organization, not only of Ukraine, but NATO, is to kill civilians or defenseless people, because obviously they have huge issues militarily, and for all intents and purposes, it just the matter what is happening right now, it's winding down, or arranging things, how the Ukraine will be basically partitioned and whatever happens with whatever the romp. So they needed PR stunt, they got it. So there you go. Danny, unmute yourself. I don't hear you.
Oh, sorry about that. So here is the BBC article again, because I think you're exactly right. It says the comments by Ukraine's military intelligence earlier in the day were seen as a tacit acknowledgement that it shot the military transport plane down, although it stressed it had no reliable information of who was on board. And Andrei, I wanted your take on whether you were talking about the missiles that were being used. There were some rumors circulating on social media that it could have been Western-made weapons, U.S. supplied missiles. How is this true?
Well, yeah,
Could you get more details?
yeah. As I already stated, it wasn't S-300. Obviously, as I already stated, you have to. I need to reiterate again. Average Western, or even for that matter, Russian journalists, that's usually nincompoops. As I already stated, they in there for exercising their complexes, whatever they are, from ranging from pedophilia to whatever you. And so the point is, they don't understand again the issue of range and the issue of getting there. When they knew that and it was settled between Ukrainian and Russian side that their plane is flying to exchange their 65 Ukrainian POWs. The plane was shut down at around 11:30 in the morning. Russian Ministry of Defense in 4 hours reported the elimination of the first French SMTP air defense complex. And it went officially by the statement of the Russian Defense Ministry, which tells you that most likely, it doesn't mean that it's 100%, but most likely it was French air defense complex, which did it.
Yeah. And what are the consequences then of such an attack? Because obviously throughout the conflict, there have been prisoner of war exchanges. But these attacks seem to come within the context. There was recently a horrific attack by Ukraine on a market in Donetsk, killing several civilians, including children. You were talking about kill everything Russian.
Yeah,
What is the impact of this for the future of the conflict? Because this seems like a major escalation, and yet at the same time, perhaps you could talk about where this conflict is then, because there's been news reports that are so just all over the place. Lots of enthusiasm sometimes from the Western mainstream media, and also a lot of pessimism. So where are things exactly?
First, it's not escalation. Ukraine, armed forces of Ukraine and their curators primarily, but not exclusively from Washington and London, due to their military incompetence, they were primarily actually concentrating on killing Russian civilians. They love doing this. You have to understand that. And again, I'm on record and I wrote about it for many years. So, and these are the last attempts, and that's not escalation. The escalation is happening on the ground with Russia taking already parts of Avdiivka and basically repelling. Yesterday, they repelled another number of attacks at Klishchiivka, and now they're moving west, Russian forces. So in this particular case, whatever they come up in the Western media, corporate media, it's all that fantasies or frustration, So, and again, as I already stated, there are no people there, none. Take anybody from the, for example, British Defense Ministry, they would know what is happening because they're so incompetent and so badly educated. So primarily their expert environment, if you look at people like Petraeus or Keane, who wouldn't be allowed to command, as I often say, a battalion in Russian armed forces. And these are people who never won anything in their life. They lost all their wars. So, and they feed this, they have this echo chamber, which they need to both, it's a sort of like, how to put it, when you agonize and your life is on there, how to put it politely? Okay, let's put it this way. It's a Wang's army again. Hitler on the 30th, on the 30th of April, or before he committed suicide, Wang's army, it just should be around, Berlin just now, and then it will relieve the pressure and the siege of by two Russian army groups, Red Army groups. We know how it all ended. Hitler committed suicide, but before that, as many, for example, Nazi big, honchos, they've been deviating between like bipolar, from the utter enthusiasm, almost, hyper excited, to being completely down. And it was kind of like this spring going, left, right, or up and down, depending on how you look at this. And this is the first sign of how things are bad for now. And again, as I already stated, I've been on a record about this, and by the time it dawned on me, sometime at the start of this counteroffensive, how incompetent NATO is militarily, I knew it was bad. Okay, I knew it was bad, but I never could comprehend how bad it was. It's just, and so what's left? Yeah, let's blow a market. They attacked kindergarten 2 days ago. So yeah, come on, that's what the only thing they can do. They cannot fight the real war, and now it's the end of the rope, and they are in panic. And of course, you have to recall today, which is absolute another sign of how bad things are. And I'm talking about actually United States asking China to interfere and lean on Iran to ask Iran for Houthis to stop doing what they're doing, obviously understanding that this is just ridiculous. First, China doesn't have that much of the influence on Iran. Iran is not necessarily directly involved right now with Houthis, because Houthis, they have their own way of doing things. So, but it just tells you, indicates to you to what degree of delusion this whole blob, all this, corporate media, New York Times, CNNs, and all those people in the Beltway, and of course in London, they are, I don't know how to even describe this. They are just parading themselves as a circus, freak show.
Yeah. And, I saw those reports today, and this is something that's repeated over and over again throughout the conflict in Ukraine too. How many times have we heard U.S. officials, the foreign policy establishment, the blob, say, China, we need China. We are urging China to help us with Russia. They've also said this with North Korea and the DPRK. They said, we're urging China to help us with the DPRK. It's a constant need to both beg China while also, of course, attempting a failed policy of containment. But I wanted to show you, Andrei, the envoy, James Kariuki of the United Kingdom. If I wanted to play this video. This was at a recent UN Security Council meeting.
Mm-hmm.
This is where James Kariuki, what he had to say about Russia. This is him repeating talking points from nearly 2 years ago now. Here's what he had to say with regard to Russia's military capabilities.
Russian military modernization has been set back 18 years. Now, Russia's defense industry strips down fridges for parts. It orders its weapons from the DPRK in violation of multiple resolutions agreed in this chamber under this Russian foreign minister's instruction. Its purchase and use of Iranian drones involves both states violating the Security Council resolution.
So there is James Kariuki showing off the UK as a principal, one of the principal members of NATO, his deep knowledge of Russia's military capacity. Andrei, could you correct the record here?
First, I can correct the basic record. Take Oxford, remove the humanities degrees from Oxford, and just dissolve it because these are academic fraud. The fact is, again, they cannot prepare a real serious officer, of the good operational, let alone strategic level. And of course, they don't teach what real industry is. What they teach there primarily, including the famous London School of Economics, which produces, a huge volume of the economic ignoramuses, they don't understand what modern industry is. It's very difficult. It's much easier to go and study political science. There's no such thing as political science, but it is much easier to go to study political science or literature, as Boris Johnson did, or being Lee Strauss, whose knowledge of geographies, there were fifth grade and sixth grade kids in Russia laughing their asses off, after her knowledge of geography. This is the type of the modern Western elites. And the only thing they can do is lie and confabulate stories. And the fact is, this story with the refrigerators and kitchen appliances originated from Germans. Christine Lambrecht, at that time the Minister of Defense of Germany. And these people, they have zero engineering technical background. They don't understand how basic things work, how basic lathe works, because basically they have been grown up into those so-called elite schools which teach absolutely nothing. They go there to, rub shoulders with the good old boys and girls. And as a result, you get those people, and they are morons. And that's the whole point. And fact is, there is no actually objective evidence that the guy who says this absurdity is not believing it. Many of them do believe that. Take anybody from State Department in Washington, or, they wouldn't know the difference between lathe and milling machine. They wouldn't understand how the signal processing is done, what Fourier transformations are, or how the signal processing radar or sonar of the submarines is. And so, they believe this, that, Russians are, I don't know if you saw this meme, I actually posted it in my blog, with the huge, shop with the Russian poor recruits from the Russian army disassembling washing machines. So I have it. It's wonderful. It's excellent. So this is beyond ridiculous. Again, it's a total degeneration and implosion of the Western political class. They are not good to mow the lawn in the front of my house. That's the result of the. By the way, yesterday Harvard already withdrew 6 scientific papers which have been absolutely faked on the cancer research. Hello, in the news all over the place. They fake cancer research. Hello. Yeah, what else? So that is why nothing works in the West anymore.
Yeah, and you would think that this would this would be contradictory, because it feels as though, you said it earlier, that this is over, that Ukraine really has nothing left. So then what compels, given that the UK, the United States, NATO have been talking about this Zelensky peace plan, and perhaps it's time to wind things down, what compels them then to, first of all, support such actions like the downing of this jet in Russian territory, and going to the UN Security Council to essentially spread, as you say, confabulations, like complete lies and propaganda? I mean, it seriously is just propaganda. So what compels this, if it really runs contradictory to NATO's interests at this point, or does it?
Well, you have to understand that primarily most of those elites, including this, be them from Great Britain or be them from the United States, most of them are highly uncultured people. They haven't been subjected to the realities of life. And that's where the culture derives from. They are highly uncultured. They are whiteboard theorists at best. And what compels them, first, ambition. From the American side, it compels them is obviously elections. They do not want the repetition of Afghanistan squared or cubed. And this is what actually defeat of the best ever American proxy is. And now, once they got involved almost directly, when they basically sustained this humiliation of the both fighting doctrine, which is risible on the part of the, for example, Pentagon, They don't know how to do strategy. They understand that something is horrible happening, so they need to do what they are on one-trick ponies. That's what I'm saying. They're very uncultured people. The fact that they know how to behave in some exclusive club, and they can differentiate between the 12-year-old and 20-year-old Scotch, it's not a culture. It's just basically shallow, a shell of the how to put it, presentability. In reality, those people don't know much. So, and when you look at this, including the degeneration of the education in the United States, let alone in Britain, I mean, what can I say? Plus, of course, when you look at the British side, they probably they have a lot of, pain from the fact, maybe to feeling that they're, pipsqueaks. Militarily, they are inconsequential. Economically, Russia just dwarfs them. So, and they cannot even find the proper officer to command their very small submarine forces. They go and do the public announcements and do their all those things in newspapers, and saying, hey, we need somebody to command our submarine forces. This is humiliation, and they cannot take it, again, precisely because they are uncultured. They don't have class, and so they have to invent things. They project constantly. They behave themselves as clowns, and as a result, we see what we see. For a normal person who has any kind of the intellect, it seems absolutely bizarre. It's just headless chicken running around, before being put, finally, and into the soup. So there you go.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like the conflict in Ukraine is kind of like the soup being stirred, so to speak, because it's just a really horrific situation. Andrei, what is happening on the battlefield? Because as you said earlier, the downing of this jet, the killing of Russian civilians in Donetsk and in other areas of Russian territory, all of it does appear to be a distraction from what's actually happening on the front lines and Russia's actual status there. So what is actually going on, and where do you see it going?
Well, they throw, again, you have to understand at this stage, Ukraine is totally incapable of conducting any kind of serious offensive operations. They can attack, for example, that's another thing, the people do not understand the difference between offensive operations and the attack. And it's a long story to explain it to it, but you can bet your whatever that average journal anyway in the world doesn't understand the difference between attack, which is a maneuver, and the offensive operations. An operation in itself, it just means that it's something above the divisional level. But what they do attacks, what is called the meat storms. They throw those tanks, whatever is left, and those pumped with drugs infantry, like in Klishevka. They did it yesterday, I believe, 6 times, all repelled with the horrendous losses for them, 10 tanks blown up. So, yeah, they can do here and there some movement, and but that's about it. The only thing they can do, and everybody talks about, including this Pentagon people who say, oh yeah, you have to go and now sit into defensive. Well, dudes, they better start learning what defensive is, because United States has no experience with defensive like at all. I mean, the last time United States was on any defensive was in Korea. And the real defensive operation they fought was in of course, the Ardennes Forest during the Battle of the Bulge. So you have these guys who didn't study the war for 70 years, and they come up and say, oh, yeah, do the defense. They had defensive lines erected for the last 9 years there. And now they've been being penetrated, and they have the crumbling, like it was the case with Avdiivka. So, what can I say? Yeah, it's just slaughter. It's a slaughter. They slaughter them. It's horrendous. But it is what it is. Nothing could be done. But don't forget, and many people do not recognize this, but you have to understand. Officially, we know that it's around, officially, plus minus 500,000 killed, KIAs alone, in armed forces of Ukraine. Then there are hundreds of thousands, if not more, maimed, absolutely disfigured, and basically broken for life veterans. The real number, again, it's much higher. Okay, we're not going to go there for now. So what do you think? How many people in Ukraine right now, especially those who lost, their limbs, those who lost their health, those who lost their friends, begin to understand and would want to settle accounts with those who are really behind it? You know what? I'll give you basically a hint. And FBI, for example, here better start thinking about it too, because there will be many disgruntled and disillusioned Ukrainian veterans coming back for revenge, and they will know who are the main authors of this slaughter, which is the largest European war since the World War II.
Right.
And those who do not understand the complexity of the situation are, well, they're morons. They graduated Ivy League, they people who have no clue about anything. So, and this is the factor which has to be considered very seriously. And now we have open confirmation that the huge number of weapons is being circulated around Europe, of course, sold. And even Sergei Lavrov 2 days ago stated, on the dark net, you can buy pretty much anything up to, anti-tank missiles. Well, guess what? I heard France has issues with their, Arab population and, African population. Well, guess what? Most of the French police wouldn't dare to go to Banlieue nowadays because they will get, just beaten the crap out of them or killed, So, well, guess what? We have to figure out where these weapons will end up. And among them, of course, Stingers, and among them, javelins. And I'm not talking about small arms. And you can literally buy it on the dark net, per Sergei Lavrov. So these guys, they didn't know what they started because they're stupid. Okay, let's face it. Yeah. As I already stated, their degree from Harvard or Yale on political science or law has to be disqualifying factor from providing any serious analysis on their, pretty soon U.S. military academies will have the same, standing. But we are talking about the fact that people do not understand what the consequences of this are. Russians understood, but now it is all, personal. So Russians killed those French mercenaries, wink, wink, and so then the next few days, some people from France, again, cadre officers, came to get the bodies. Russians whacked them again. So, and this is now personal, so and that's not going to end up well for Europe. It's already didn't end up well for them. I mean, it's pretty much done for them.
Yes, perhaps we can transition then, because I think there's a good segue into maybe an unintended consequence, or maybe an intended consequence of this conflict has been the demilitarization of NATO proper. So, of course, one of Russia's stated aims from the beginning of the special military operation was the demilitarization of Ukraine. But we're finding that all of NATO finds itself demilitarized. And I just want to show you quickly and show the audience quickly what I was speaking about in terms of the, you called it almost like a bipolar characteristic, a tendency. Here you have the Associated Press talking about NATO's new ammunition package as a key artillery and ammunition contract to replenish allied supplies and help Ukraine. Positive, right? $1.2 billion worth of a contract to make tens of thousands of artillery rounds to replenish dwindling stocks of its member countries to aid Ukraine. Now, though, we need to get into Newsweek, how they reported it, and it's a different attitude. NATO chief admits new bullets won't arrive in Ukraine for years. So that 1.1 billion euros or 1.2 billion US dollars, Jens Stoltenberg told reporters at the NATO headquarters in Brussels that it's become a battle of ammunition, but those munitions are not going to get there until initial deliveries made by the end of 2025. So, Andrei, 2025. That sounds like NATO is demilitarized. Could you explain how this happened? What has happened here?
No, it's very simple. Russian general staff is not stupid. They have a really great analytical structures, including economic analysis, and they do economic intelligence. Obviously, it's a lot of it is OSINT, open source intelligence. It's readily available through many media. They knew to what degree United States have been deindustrialized. And for example, it's not only about the money. Again, I mean, those dollars and euros, absolutely meaningless numbers. Okay, they reflect nothing. It's all just garbage, basically. What you need to look at is at the supply chains and technological chain. Just to give you example, 155 millimeter shells, they use a lot of, and what is required there is a lot of black powder. Well, guess what? There is only one black powder plant in the United States. People said it's exploded like a couple of years ago. Possible, I'm not saying that it's not true, but it's in Louisiana. And to produce this thing, which is absolutely crucial for 155 or 152 millimeter shells, you need to have this black powder produced, but you need to have like 30 different chemical elements. Well, guess what? Basically, the number of those elements have been supplied to the United States, and guess what? From 3 times. Where from? From Russia. So, and this is just goes across the whole thing. It goes across the issue of the producing high precision weapons. Russia outproduces, in terms of high precision weapons, all NATO combined by probably order of magnitude. So, and the gap is gonna grow even more. Not to mention the fact that basically when you looked at the NATO and US weaponry, it is a lagging generation or two behind what Russia produces now and delivers to the front line. So it's indeed the militarization of NATO. But I mean, now when United States squeezing Europe for everything it's got in terms of selling it very expensive energy, and they have no other option. Well, they have option. They try to do it, circumnavigate this whole thing, but they cannot obviously get any more, required volume of Russian cheap energy. In the end, this begins to bear its fruits, so to speak, and they suddenly always expensive, always ineffective weapons of NATO, they suddenly become, so to say, worth their weight in gold because of the incredibly high prohibitive costs in terms of energy. And of course, you're losing their appropriate, basically, cadre, the working class, so to speak, which was responsible for basically assembling and manufacturing those things. And then, of course, there is another issue of research and development, which was miscalculated strategically on the historical scale. And this is the issue of the missile technologies and air defense technologies. And when you put this together, sure, what NATO wants to do, to fight Russia conventionally, good luck,
Yeah. That is, that kind of sums it up. Why is the United States then using Europe in this way? Because we hear NATO is this grand alliance. You hear Joe Biden saying NATO is stronger than ever, but it's felt like in the last, especially since the end of the failed counteroffensive, it's felt as if the United States has almost exported its woes to Europe. It has, of course, there is no US aid being agreed upon to Ukraine. And yet Europe, the UK in particular, and now France has been pretty active. You mentioned the mercenaries before. The United States is using Europe in this way. How can this go on? How long can this go on? Because it feels like this is not just a temporary fix, but also a fix that is likely to dry up very, very fast.
Well, yeah, and again, as I wrote for many years now, and this is the consensus really. It's not me that I came up with this idea. No, I was just basically agreeing with other people. For example, like Mr. Hudson, Michael Hudson, who is a brain of the incredible scale in modern economics. And it's the fact that Europe is lunch. Okay, Europe is lunch. United States simply ran out of the real economy, and so for United States to survive in any shape or form, if you wish, it's important to first own the European market, and that's what the Build Back Better was all this about. But again, you have to keep in mind that selling Europe the expensive U.S. energy. The United States sells a lot of energy. Some of it they will not see Europeans for a while, but that's another matter altogether. But hey, you know what? Europe has no international subjectivity. They are lapdogs. United States tells Europe jump, they ask how high. And as a result, they have to die eventually. But they have to basically extend the agony of the American economic system, which also is crumbling. So, and when you look at naturally how they deindustrialized each other, it's absolutely astounding. It's historically unprecedented. So they moved pretty much all industry to Asia, and there you go. Now what you have? Oh, you have a lot of financial services. That's about it, you know. And as a result, while the United States wants to sell this energy because the United States does have natural resources, unlike it is the case with the Europe, which is really dependent on pretty much most of it. And when you look at this, that's, United States wants to live and wants to eat. And you cannot blame United States for this. You can blame economic system, which is self-destructive. But obviously, you know what it is. You die today for me to die tomorrow. This is what is this all about. And Europe is again. I think so. We're going to see the end of Europe much faster than anybody expected. And I'm not just referring because of German farmers and now French, and they all go and just on strike and all that. It's just the fact that Europe as the civilization, as a culture, have been completely wiped out, and Europeans participated in this crime. So there you go. And as a result, you cannot produce. Just think about it. I mean, if you have, for example, if you have any kind of NATO, let's say, small arm, which you produce. I mean, I'm basically giving you just the number ratios. It doesn't mean that they are real numbers, but they give you a very real ratio. When you have your single machine gun, or just which is 10 times more expensive than, for example, Russia does the same. How long do you think you're gonna last? First, you will be able to produce it in the required quantities, and then, of course, quality falls, and the whole thing, just the snowball, of the problems begins, and then it turns to the avalanche. And we are observing it today. We are humans. Our lifespan is very short, relative to history. Our attention span is also very short, because we cannot necessarily grasp all the history of even the last 100 years. But in terms of nations, last 50 years, it's not that big of a deal. It's really short term. And what we observe now, I thought the collapse of the Soviet Union was a big deal. My gosh, what we're seeing right now is just the start. It's going to get much worse.
Yeah. I mean, and the huge contradiction between Europe and the United States' actual military capacity, what it can do, let's say, against a so-called adversary like Russia, versus what it claims it can do, or how it presents itself and speaks about itself, is so wide now. And I wanted to show, because you have spoken a lot about the fact that the so-called strategic thinkers, the think tankers, the military strategists, so-called, that they are nothing but morons. And so here we have a story. This is the same day as
Oh,
the
okay, yeah,
plane being downed. They're talking about, so this is from Business Insider reporting on, though, and this is important. It says Russia is struggling to breach Ukraine's defenses because its troops keep getting blown up by drones when they gather in groups, says the Institute for the Study of War. So I know you've been following the Institute for the Study of War quite closely, and I know that you talk a
no,
lot about their
I don't follow amateurs, okay? And so, uh,
I just wanted to show quickly, because they're truly amateurs. You talk a lot about how a lot of the so-called strategists of the United
yeah.
States often are experts in a kind of war, or maybe a particular form of war, or maybe a particular war where the so-called adversary maybe is quite weak, maybe vulnerable. For example, Iraq.
Mhm,
Here we have General Keane, who is the chairman of the Institute for the Study of War,
mhm,
and
mhm.
his background. Look, General Keane was in the Pentagon on 9/11, provided oversight and support for the wars in
Wow.
Afghanistan and Iraq. Since 2004, General Keane has conducted frequent trips to Iraq and Afghanistan for senior defense officials, with multiple visits during the surge period in both countries. So, this is exactly the kind of person that is coming up with these reports within these think tanks that are saying Russia is the one that's in trouble here, completely blinding, it seems, their eyes, or putting the wool over their eyes to the fact that they don't really have the capacity to go toe to toe with Russia. So, how do you? I guess I'll just kick it to you in terms of your reaction to this.
No, yeah, I get it. It's Institute for Study of War. It's Kagan's operation. It's the Kagan family, the clan. Vicky Nuland's brother-in-law, I believe. He is a brother of her hubby. General King would know the military history. He doesn't know. I can tell you for immediately. He doesn't have no clue about the history of the World War II. He doesn't know what strategic planning is on the level such as Russian general staff does, and he wouldn't pass the entrance exams to the Academy of the General Staff in Russia. He would fail academically. So yeah, this is the level of the people who run. Well, they run Pentagon pretty much. They lost every single war they ever fought. So, and yet they are for some reason experts. So what can I say? I mean, listen, I communicate with people in Russia they are also stupefied as me, that these people are, it's like, and we have been, kind of respecting them. It's like, there's nothing to respect that. There's no integrity left. There's no military decorum left. They pretend those things. They confabulate them. Well, as I already stated, basically the most of the American 20th century and 21st century military history is confabulated, with the exception of the Pacific War. The rest of it is practically wet fantasies by those people keen, the same as pretty much any of them, Petraeus and all that, what they teach in the U.S. War College, or let alone in the Command and General Staff College in the Leavenworth, Kansas, is primarily narratives written by the Wehrmacht officers, which came to the United States together with a bunch of the Nazis, including Werner von Braun, the father of the American space program. And these are the guys who lost the war on the Eastern Front, who confabulated the American military history for them, because they needed to find the excuse why they got their ass handed to them by the Red Army, which ended up in Berlin in 1945. So they confabulated it for them. They wrote fighting doctrine, all those Wehrmacht generals and senior officers. And the United States was absolutely, strictly copying this whole idea without even understanding what Joint Chiefs of Staff has nothing to do with general staff. They're not comparable. There's totally two different military structures. And the way their operation planning is done by the general staff, because it's a joint operational planning, the United States has no culture. U.S. military has no culture of this. Absolutely, because this is all about services and who gets more money. That's it. That's the only thing they exist for. And then, of course, they pretend that the finest fighting force in history, which cannot win the freaking war against their third-rate opponents, and that's the whole thing. And when you look at these people, not to speak about this, again, Business Insider is the newspaper for wiping your butt, in the toilets, pretty much, when you run out of the toilet paper. And even that is very dangerous to getting, basically cancer, brain cancer through the anus, So because this is absolute ridiculous. These people have no self-respect. They don't have any military honor, which says, you know what, I cannot go out and lie. They cannot go out and give, for example, narration of the operational objectives. For example, like Mr. Rutskoy came out in the start of and Mr. Rutskoy is Colonel General. He's the guy who, by the way, the main operational directorate of the General Staff. These guys, it's different class altogether, okay? It's different class, and they don't understand. They would never understand what's the difference, because it's Dunning-Kruger effect. You cannot teach a fool that he's a fool because he is a fool, and this is pretty much, again, as I stated, Keen wouldn't even understand how it works. They don't teach that. They teach about how great U.S. military is. And there you go. It was shown its proper place now.
Yeah, we're learning quite, I think, starkly how the vast majority, if not 100% of the Western mainstream media at this point, Business Insider included, are, if there was a brand of toilet paper worse than one ply, that is what it is. It's incredibly painful to use, ineffectual. And one thing I will last comment on this particular topic, as the Western mainstream media, as the Institute for the Study of War, these hawkish think tanks coming from the foreign policy blob, Washington, NATO, etc., as they're talking about Russia having trouble on the front lines, the news is actually really tragic for Ukraine. And we often talk about how Ukraine is looking, and NATO, of course, is deeply into the addiction of killing everything Russian. But Ukrainians are the ones who are dying en masse. And now Ukraine, we're hearing horrific stories that have been more than confirmed in terms of older people, women, everyone's being sent out. And here's a recent report of Ukraine sending untrained conscripts straight to the front line, according to another piece of very harsh toilet paper, the U.S.-based outlet, the Daily Beast. So the U.S. mainstream media, the Western mainstream media is reporting on this. This is the dichotomy. This is the bipolar. This is the cognitive dissonance almost. It's on the one hand, Russia's having so many issues on the front line, but yet they're admitting there's so many dead Ukrainians because of this conflict they've started, because this conflict they keep pushing, that now they're sending untrained conscripts to the front.
Well, yeah, and don't forget, once the results of the Ukraine war crimes tribunals, which will be held in Donetsk and in Moscow, and is being prepared, will become available with the names of those people who initiated this, and the names of people, including the Western curators from media, Gibbelsonian media and Pentagon, CIA, what have you, MI6, they will be named. Many of them are already known. And that's the problem. And you see, that's the whole thing. Many of those people who write for, this media and those military experts, they studied the war based on the Hollywood. And it's not me. I'm not exaggerating. They did. They think that a military victory is shaped by how many kilometers you covered during the day, how much territory you captured. They don't understand what destruction of the enemy is. They love to, quote Clausewitz, Sun Tzu, what have you, But the problem, as I already stated, in the end, when you look attentively how the real war is done, it's, again, I don't think so anybody of them read Svechin. Okay, Alexander Andreevich Svechin. They never heard of him. Probably most of those people. Petrev certainly never read him. So if they did, and especially if they studied, for example, World War II, real history, not the baloney which they teach in West Point, and but what is really happened and what were the ratios, and not those numbers which German generals gave them, who already settled in the United States after the World War II and Operation Paperclip, if you remember that. So they would be terrified, and they would probably learn a thing or two. The problem is they never learned anything. They are incapable of learning because it is the virus of the exceptionalism. And what happened last 2 years just absolutely destroyed this whole thing. Apart from the fact that, we know the political process, the world is not stupid. Everybody has internet nowadays. Everybody sees the news, real news, and what is coming. And it's unbelievable.
It is truly unbelievable. Well, now maybe we can talk about outside of the Ukraine conflict, what's going on as a whole for the US NATO axis, the blob, the empire, however we want to characterize it, because now you have a Biden administration that is bombing Iraq. So there's now a new bombing campaign inside of Iraq, as Iraq's prime minister is telling the United States that it is very much ready to eject U.S. forces from Iraq. You have Biden bombing Yemen due to the Red Sea crisis, which many economists and military analysts and officials are all saying is going to last for months and months and months. And of course, you have all of the other machinations that's happening across West Asia because of the US-backed war in Gaza that Israel is waging. That, of course, is a full-blown genocide. So this just here in this particular region of the world, on top of the Ukraine conflict, you have the United States seemingly bogged down even more. And I wanted to hear your analysis and opinion on what you often talk about in terms of where the United States is most comfortable. But even now, the United States attempting to pick on smaller forces, I mean, the Ansar Allah forces, they don't have a navy, they don't have an army, they don't have tanks, they don't have any of these things. Yet they're not doing too well here. They're not resolving the crisis in Gaza. I mean, what's going on? Is this a kind of a sign of what's to come for the United States? You said it's over in Ukraine. I mean, is it just over?
Yeah, it's a snowball effect. Once the whole thing started to disintegrate as it happened, and again, listen, if you basically listen to what I was talking about for years now, for 2 years from the start of SMO and Special Military Operation, and what I written, it wasn't before this counteroffensive. It was like, dudes, what are you doing? You're gonna destroy yourself. You're not gonna destroy Russia. But they don't know anything, and that's the horror of this whole situation. But once this counteroffensive thing just basically have been drowned in the Ukrainian blood, the whole thing started to unravel. The whole edifice kind of came down, and all this ugly truth became very visible. And once you suddenly have this, you have one Russia against pretty much combined West, and not only she's doing good, she's kicking it butt, and essentially just pushing it towards the abyss, the precipice. So then suddenly other people said, you know what, we don't care. We're not afraid, and that's going to happen more and more and more, So, and that's one of the factors which nobody wants to talk about. But once you see what is happening to the, but now you have the situation with the IDF. I'm not specialist in Middle East. I'm not specialist in the Israeli Defense Force. But when you have your elite brigades being withdrawn because they sustained serious losses, no matter how you treat, what is your attitude towards Hamas or Israel, you have to admit that from the basic operational military logic, that means what? They got bogged down there. They commit genocide, and this is part of the frustration. This is the part of their, exceptionalism. same drivers which drive United States to the wall or through the wall. And when you look at this is not going well for the what is called combined West at all. It doesn't go well economically, militarily, politically, and what have you. That is why this clown from Great Britain, I'm sure he has some aristocracy in his bloodline, but he's clown nonetheless. He has to come up with this preposterous absurdity about Russians. He doesn't know that Russia produces own from 360 to 65 nanometers topology of the microchips. Evidently, somebody has forgot to tell MI6 what is going on. But again, you have their intelligence services which don't know how to spy anymore. So, and there you go. You have the generals who won't be able to command a brigade in the serious military. And so, and you look at this, it's just like, holy moly, man, it's just complete implosion. And that's why many people say that, yeah, it's civilizational level. It's not the level of just military or pure some economics and like, oh yeah, it's some kind of recession, we're gonna come out of it. No, this is not about it. Europe is getting poor. It's gonna be much more poor. It's gonna be moved from the first world to the second. In the best case scenarios. Some places will go to the third world. And again, when you look, for example, at Paris, except for the touristy places, or London, it is the third world. It stinks, and rats everywhere. They have the crime, which is absolutely not arrested. They don't know what to do with it. So there you go. And look at some US states and some localities. It's unbelievable. There are bad places everywhere. Russia has very many bad places. But when you look at the Detroit, or for crying out loud in Philadelphia, what is happening there, it's my gosh, it's ghettos from the worst parts of Africa, and this is just the way it is. And I'm not talking about the drug usage altogether. The Western civilization is being killed, absolutely driven to the wall, and my heart actually breaks just observing it, and that's what it is.
Yeah, and it's a nightmare. You're speaking of that dichotomy that exists. You have elites doing quite well, and then you have a great many more people in the combined West, the collective West, suffering and suffering and suffering, and in many ways suffering as a consequence directly because of these wars. Of course, Europe is probably the principal target when it comes to what's gone on with Ukraine. They have really suffered the grave consequences of that
Oh,
conflict.
just the start. There will be much worse than that, Billy. It's just the warm
Yeah,
up.
exactly. It's just a warm up. And the United States, though, in the past, Andrei, when the United States let's say this Pax Americana era, when the United States came out of the fall of the Soviet Union and declared itself as the genius, as you like to call him,
Yeah.
the moron, Francis Fukuyama said, it's the end of history.
Oh,
There's
no,
going to be
yeah.
no
Yeah, let's
more.
not bring these people. Yeah, you just can't come on foreign relations, such a clown upon clown. It's just
Yeah. So they predicted that the United States was that it was going to rule the world forever. And it went on to wage these absolutely brutal campaigns, and as a show of force and a show of strength, Iraq, Afghanistan, and now 2 decades later, we're in another iteration, another phase of this approach, this absolutely maniacal approach to military affairs, and the United States can't seem to do anything. You would think that the Houthis, Ansar Allah, that the Islamic resistance in Iraq, that these would be relatively small forces to be wiped away, given the U.S.'s massive arsenal, the amount of money that is poured into the military-industrial complex. Why is it that the United States struggles so much? And why is it? I mean, you can connect this also to Israel, but at the same time, the U.S. is the one that seems to be now taking the lead on this question of how to resolve the Middle East for its own interests. So why is it that the U.S. is struggling given this gargantuan? If people are going to suffer, why is it that the military objectives are also suffering and the military strategy is also suffering here?
Well, because they don't really study strategy. They think that they read Clausewitz or read some, other histories. Again, as I already stated, you cannot create a solid foundation. I mean, solid, basically conclusions based on the sandcastles. Most of the American history, military history, is confabulated. United States didn't defeat Hitler. General Patton wasn't great general to, it's all Hollywood. It always was. So, and as a result, instead of studying others who fought before them, well, again, it's difficult to explain. And when you do not have the real school of military thought, United States produced only one strategist of international reputation, and it was the Admiral Mahan. So I'm Alfred Tyre Mahan. So, and he wrote The Influence of the Sea Power on History, and that was an important book, but it became also obsolete by 1950s. Okay, with the invention of radar, aircraft carriers already have been mature weapon system, and then suddenly, where do you go from here? You have all those confabulators. They write about these things. If you read attentively at some, for example, collections of the strategic thought from the National Defense University from 1980s, my God, half of it is written by Germans or people who basically came up with all those fairy tales about the air power. But it's absolutely not true. And the basically objective operational data supports it. But they wanted it, and of course they got the first Gulf War. They beat the 20-year-old professional boxer, beat the crap out of the 5-year-old kid in the sandbox, and feel proud about it. I mean, again, you have to know the history in a sense, history not some kind of the stories, but you have to know the history as the basically the science which provides the causality. But when you have your military history written in the same way as that the wind blows because the tops of the trees are moving, then there you go. They got it all wrong, upside down or 180 degrees, or 360 degrees if follow Annalena Baerbock's, geometry level. So, and what do you expect? You're not gonna get things right. But when you got lucky. United States got lucky. It achieved a lot. There are some things about United States which I deeply admire and, in fact, love. But as some of the people on my blog once wrote in the comments, which is absolutely correct, United States achieved the greatest successes when it was behind the plow instead of the machine gun. So, and United States is a historic newcomer in the continental warfare, and they learned all the wrong lessons. So there you go. We'll see where it will take it. But the point is, American elites, for the most part, which we have today, they are utterly incompetent. They are corrupt, and they're uncultured. Look at them. They're just good God. I mean, remove those things, with those nice suits and everything. The guys won't be able to hold their discussion with anybody, a real professional. As I already stated, General Kino Petraeus, they won't pass the entrance exam to the Academy of the General Staff in Russia. They don't have enough academic wherewithal, let alone physics and mathematics to go with it, so.
Yeah, my 2 visits to China, I was told by many people that most U.S. officials, the vast majority of U.S. officials, especially heads of state, the commanders in chief, would not be able to be elected to the lowest level of political office in China because of their lack of experience and their lack of capacity, their lack of service. Just they're and I think it speaks to exactly what you're saying. The U.S. is run by people. NATO is run by people. The collective West is run by people who want all of the benefits and spoils of war, but want absolutely nothing to
They
do
measure
with the cost.
most of them measured what passes for the history in the United States. They measured. I know some admiral in U.S. Navy currently, I believe, either admiral or the guy from the missile forces, something like that. He has degree in literature. Okay, he's a general. So what do you expect? What do you expect? Yeah, so I mean, it's just inconceivable to have people who have at least graduate engineering degree and degree in the at least bachelor's, equivalent bachelor's in military science, to go anywhere in Russian armed forces. Of course, you have the combat veterans, which, for example, some of them went on the front lines, performed extremely well. Guess what? What happens after that? No, they're not given just, officer epaulets. They're withdrawn and placed into on their privileged, stream into the military academies, where they still have to study the whole damn thing, And when you look at this, and just like, good God, it's unbelievable. And then you remove the those expensive suits and expensive watch, and what do you have? You have the guy who probably won't be able to work any serious job, and that's what we have.
Yeah, that's indeed what we have, and perhaps you can comment on the fact that while the United States and the combined West, the collective West, are getting bogged down now again in the Middle East, they're completely and utterly there's nothing left of what's going on in Ukraine, but yet it seems that the overall posture is to continue onward, attempting to provoke Russia. I mean, if there's anything about all of the everything that's happened in the last couple of years, it's been about provoking Russia. China as well is, of course, a principal target of the United States, and the United States has
Now,
done its.
now let me correct it immediately.
Mhm.
And I'm on record for many years on that too. But if you look attentively at the latest talk 5 or 6 days ago between J.D. Vance, the Senator J.D. Vance, and Tucker Carlson, and they talk about it, and J.D. Vance went on record. They hate Russian gods. They look at Russia and Russian people as the main enemies of the United States. All this talk about China, listen, yeah, it's important, no doubt about it. But for them, Russia is the enemy number one. And now, when they have been humiliated, because they are one-trick ponies. Again, they one-trick ponies. They've been taught history written by German generals, practically. And the point is that they think that they can repeat World War II. Let's get the war in Europe. Let's ruin it. Russia will ruin Russia, will ruin, Europe. Then we come in, because we just spent all the war behind the two, basically, oceans. And you know what? Bang, we are back on the horse as it was after World War II, Marshall Plan and all the thing. You cannot explain those morons there that actually oceans today are not actually any kind of barrier. In fact, they are perfect places for attack on the United States, even conventionally. But you cannot explain this to the average senator or average congressman who has degree in law or journalism or PR, what it means, what modern warfare is. Because they don't study modern warfare in the US military academies. They studied the repetition of the Gulf War against the enemy who cannot shoot back. They cannot, half of the army which was illiterate. That's how they taught themselves. And in doing so, they damaged the United States beyond unbelievable, the scale of the damage. And hey, look at their reputation. People already laughing. Where's the Abrams tanks? Because they know they put them on the battlefield, they will be burned in the moment they appear on the battlefield. So that's so much. They already have enough humiliation with pretty much most of their American weapon systems, including those Patriots. And there you go. What else? What are they gonna send there? F-16s, just they probably will be good for one takeoff. After that, they will be shut down. So, and then suddenly some of them begin to sense that, and they have their frustration. They go through the Kubler-Ross model, denial, then bargaining, So that's 5 points of the grief. So they go through it. And if for a person it could be very painful to go through it, for states when you have this whole situation, your whole founding mythology of the exceptionalism being, just blown up to smithereens by the power which have been much longer in this business than the United States. Russia fought the best of the best of the West ever could throw on them. And then suddenly they thought they are better than Wehrmacht. Oh, come on. I mean, Jesus. But even when you look at the best of the Wehrmacht, I mean, there's no even any American general who can measure up to them. Well, Russians defeated them. Well, Red Army. So there you go.
Yeah. Yeah. And, grief, I think that's a great way to frame this, because it almost feels like everything that the United States is doing, everything the combined West is doing, has this huge element of grief. I mean, before Israel decided to respond in the way that it did to October 7th, it appeared that the United States had attempted to look away from the Middle East in a large respect, and now they're back almost licking their chops, so to speak, and unable to do anything of anything worthwhile. And then, everywhere it seems like there's this grief to it. You mentioned that Russia's the big charge, and I definitely agree with that. But even with China, it seems like they can't get out of their own way with China either. They talk out of one part of their mouth, and then they talk out of the other side, almost as if they understand this bargaining. You say almost as if they understand that they're not really in the position, the United States and the combined West, to confront anyone.
Let me put it this way. Why I think so it's important. Chinese real economy dwarfs the economy of the United States. United States already lost economic competition to China, period. They either have to live with that and accept its reality, or they might go and do some stupid things, But I mean, United States is not competitor to China. They still need to kind of, come to this conclusion, to appreciation of this fact and act accordingly. But they still pretend that they, I present those numbers all the time. China's shipbuilding industry alone makes United States, shipbuilding looks like puny. I mean, inconsequential. So, and when you look at this, and now you have the other thing, which was shocking for me, which was reported about a week ago, that 40% of the U.S. Submarine force is actually cannot be deployed to sea because they are in line waiting for the repairs, for maintenance. This is unbelievable. This is unbelievable. I never saw anything like this. Really, I don't. It's the repetition of the 1990s in Russia, post-collapse Russia. This is where we're getting at now.
Yes. And Andrei, I'm wondering if you could, there's a few questions that came in. Perhaps you can, before I let you go, if you would be so kind to entertain them. So we have one first super chat question from, thank you, Rafa King of Clay. Wanted to know what your thoughts are on Hungary's long-term future if Russia takes enough of Ukraine to connect to Hungary. I'm wondering your view on that.
I spoke about this in my last video, actually. There is an angle right now, the golden angle, the border of Slovakia, which suddenly made a 180 degrees, and now in an extremely pro-Russian, government. Pro-Russian, I mean, common sense. They are pro-Slovakian first and foremost. And then you have this other part of the, they're almost 90 degrees, the border of Hungary with Ukraine. And when you look at the map and when you look at the Uzhgorod, you look at all those possible Slovakian and especially Hungarian enclaves. Once Russia takes Odessa, which is going to happen one way or another, and that means land bridge to Transnistria, guess what? You suddenly have the land bridge Slovakia, Hungary, then Hungary automatically means what? Austria, and then you have Hungary also means Serbia. And then suddenly you have this few years back wrote, Hungary is going to be a very wealthy nation if they keep Orban and Fidesz in power. And once they land bridge is built there, we understand the pipelines, goods, transfer of goods. It's going to be enormous for Hungary and Slovakia. So access to BRICS economies, my gosh.
Yeah. One last question. This is from a Patreon member. So that's one of the benefits of joining the Patreon, which you can find in the video description, is you can submit questions to guests and they'll be asked as they can be answered. But Fahim wants to know about how you would rate the diplomatic prowess of Sergei Lavrov against Shevardnadze, the former Georgian. Man, I cannot
Oh
pronounce that.
God.
The former Georgian foreign
Yeah, we
minister.
know who he is. Yeah. There's no comparison. Okay. Sergei Lavrov, first and foremost, apart from being probably the greatest Russian diplomat in my gosh, since Gromyko, and he's the guy of the kind of Gorchakov tradition. Unlike Shevardnadze, he is devout patriot of Russia, and he's extraordinarily cultured man. And so there are no diplomat right now in the world who can actually measure up to Lavrov in respect to what he does and how his Minister of the Foreign Affairs operates. Shevardnadze was a traitor. He was a Georgian. He didn't give a flying whatever coitus about Russians, and the fate of Russia. He was a Georgian nationalist to a certain degree. So yeah, as all Gorbachev administration, they were traitors or corrupt people to the core, and they were incompetent. Yeah, it's Gorbachev is a euphemism for incompetence, as was his cabinet basically. So.
Well, Andrei, you spent a lot of time with me this evening. I really appreciate you coming on. Please let people know where they can find you. I have your YouTube channel in the video description, so people can definitely subscribe there and check it out. But yeah, I'll leave it to you. All right, Andrei, it was great to be with you.
My pleasure.
Yeah, so everyone can find your channel in the video description, and please do check out his work. It's great. If you want updates on what's going on, the special military operation, plus much more, go there. But Andrei, I'll have to be in touch with you again soon, and I hope you have a good rest of your evening.
You too. Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
All right, everybody. All right, so that was a great conversation with Andrei Martyanov, the geopolitical and military analyst, and all things Russian. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. I'll be on with you for a little while longer. I have one more story I wanted to cover. Okay. And we can do that. I'm going to cover a China related story. All right. Because I think it's important to cover what's happening with regard to China. I have a story about the war that is brewing by the United States, led by the United States. And so, yeah, let's see. Okay. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go. Let's begin. Okay, I gotta just go back there. Let me just get this set up. Okay. This is a doozy of a story. All right. And it's gonna factor in with some of the economic news that we've also been told about China, but first we're going to get into the war. All right, we're going to get into the war because there is a war brewing. All right, there is a war brewing. So give me a second here as I set up all the stories. All right. If you thought that the containment policy that the United States has toward China has dialed back or has been reduced in any way, or maybe there's been a change of heart given recent diplomatic ventures or faux diplomatic ventures, as I like to call them, by the United States toward China, you would be mistaken. The United States is very much committed to building up toward war with China. It just so happens that it is bogged down in so many other places that its capabilities are restrained at the moment. Restrained in Ukraine because of the absolute nightmare that has been the Russian special military operation, which has absolutely demilitarized not just Ukraine, but also all of NATO. Then, of course, there is the quagmire now brewing in the Middle East in response to Israel's onslaught on Gaza, which has actually inflamed and absolutely inflamed a regional war that now includes Yemen, Iraq, and Hezbollah and Lebanon, and on and on and on. But the United States and its war think tanks are preparing for war with China, and they're trying to tell themselves sweet nothings to convince themselves that they can win such a war. I've talked about the numerous war simulations that the United States has, that their think tanks have come up with in order to say the United States can win a war with China over Taiwan. Well, here is another iteration of this. China doesn't have the military power to successfully invade Taiwan, the majority of 52 U.S. experts said in a survey. A think tank surveyed 52 U.S. experts on whether they thought China could successfully invade Taiwan. Only 27% said they thought Beijing could pull off a successful, more amphibious assault. Their belief that the U.S. would intervene in an invasion may have led to their answer. So there you go. Lots of confidence in the U.S.'s military prowess here. So who was this survey by? It was by the Center for Strategic and International Studies, which gathered opinions from U.S. experts, 52 of them in November or December of 2023. And only 27% of them said they strongly or somewhat agree that the People's Liberation Army might be able to pull off an amphibious invasion. A deciding factor for many of these experts could have been the belief that the U.S. would militarily intervene in the event of an attack. An overwhelming 96% of U.S. experts were completely or moderately confident that if China invades Taiwan in the next 5 years, the U.S. military would intervene to defend Taiwan. So lots of faith here, and I'll just show you that this study actually does come from, the CSIS, the Center for Strategic International Studies, surveying the experts' U.S. and Taiwan views on China's approach to Taiwan. So you can get the full report there if you want to torture yourself. But I wanted to show you that this organization, this organization, CSIS, here are their donors. Do you want to see who their donors are? Okay, so they have many different donors. Corporate donors, foundation donors, U.S. allied and partner government donors. Who's giving $250,000 and up to the CSIS? The government of the United States, Japan, Republic of Korea, in the UAE, and of course, Taiwan. So you have basically a slush fund here. And then, of course, with corporate donors, who's funding this organization? Well, you have the biggest banks and the oil companies. And look, Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman. You have Bank of America, Chevron. Essentially, what CSIS is then is a mouthpiece of the war makers, the war profiteers, not really the war strategists, as Andrei Martyanov would say. But nonetheless, the United States is looking into, they're asking their so-called experts, can the U.S. win? And indeed, these experts from this think tank, from the hirelings essentially of the U.S. military industrial complex, says yes. They all say yes, they can win. Well, perhaps it's because they're listening to absolutely ridiculous stories. This came out in mid-January, a rumor that Xi Jinping is in battle with China's own military, and the outcome could drag the U.S. into World War III. This was reported in Business Insider and also the New York Post. But this story circulated as if it had any basis in fact. Many of the reports across the Western mainstream media, they just repeat themselves, they share each other's stories, were repeating a interesting rumor that Xi Jinping is in a struggle with China's military, purging senior commanders to reshape it. He wants the generals ready and willing to go to war, said analysts. A Chinese invasion somewhere like Taiwan could drag the U.S. into a third world war. So they're thinking about war. They're thinking the U.S. could be dragged into a war. And they're saying that Xi Jinping is fighting with China's own military, seeking to purge commanders he sees as unwilling or unable to go to war, military analysts told Business Insider. So what's interesting about this is you're about to find out who these analysts are. And the principal one, the top cited one, should be of interest. It is none other than Gordon Chang, a senior fellow at Gatestone Institute and author of China is Going to War. Xi Jinping, he says, is trying to gain control of the military, and I think he is thinking that he needs officers who are prepared to actually fight. So here we have a rumor circulating. Why would U.S. experts believe they can defeat China or the United States military can defeat China? Well, because they have so-called experts telling them that Xi Jinping is struggling with his own military to prepare for a war that they're not ready for. But Gordon Chang, that's an interesting individual. You may remember him from his hundreds of Fox News appearances, or you may remember him for his famous book, The Coming Collapse of China, a collapse which never came to fruition. Gordon Chang is nothing if not a fraud. But this fraud comes from the Gatestone Institute, they said. And so what is the Gatestone Institute? Well, it's this very shady, another think tank, a so-called International Policy Council that right now is very caught up in what's happening in Gaza and with Iran. It's a consortium of essentially faux journalists peddling war. But who leads this organization? The Gatestone Institute is a nonpartisan, not-for-profit international policy council and think tank dedicated to educating the public about what the mainstream media fails to promote. Institutions of democracy and the rule of law, human rights, they say, a free and strong economy, energy independence, a military capable of peace at home and in the free world, ensuring the public stays informed of threats to our individual liberty, sovereignty, and free speech. So that is what they claim to be doing. But I want to show you who leads this organization. So the Gatestone Institute, while it's almost impossible to find the funders, we can just look at who heads it. The founder and the president is Nina Rosenwald. She's a lifelong defender of American principles of liberty, freedom of speech, and peace through strength. Her work supports the rights of religious minorities, she says, pro-democratic institutions, and women around the world. She serves on the board of look at these organizations: Human Rights in China, Middle East Forum, the Committee for Accuracy of Middle East Reporting, the National Committee of American Foreign Policy, and the Institute for National Security Studies. But this is the kicker. Look at this one. While all of those institutions are no doubt conduits of the National Endowment for Democracy or some astroturfed U.S. government funding source, this is the kicker. She's a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, basically the CIA's principal think tank, a founding member of the Board of Regents for the Center for Security Policy, and a former member of the National Board of the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, more famously known as AIPAC. So, the Gatestone Institute is essentially founded by one of the most ardent members, leaders of AIPAC, former members, and a stalwart, a veteran of the CIA's principal think tank, the Council on Foreign Relations. So, how true and credible could these predictions be? The United States essentially is blowing its own whistle. It is telling itself sweet nothings that it can defeat China. But this only shows that they have real intentions of going to war with China and that they are mobilizing their thought leaders, which really is all the United States has at this point, given it doesn't really have the capabilities to strike at China, to isolate China, to contain China as they claim. So they're using these thought leaders to convince us that they can go to war. But the money, if you follow it, it always goes back to the same sources. It goes back to the Council on Foreign Relations. It goes back to the US government. It goes back to the military industrial complex. That is who is peddling this, because they're trying to sell you war. They're not trying to sell a winnable war. That is not the point here at all. And here was China's reactions to all of this. The US keeps hyping military tension around the Taiwan Straits. Washington, secessionists, the real troublemakers to undermine peace, according to experts. So China has just come off the heels, and Taiwan has just come off the heels of this recent election on the province of Taiwan, which reelected the Democratic Progressive Party, which is a secessionist party. And it is my estimation that the United States now feels very confident in its future of building up. It will take a years, perhaps, to do this, or not, but it will take quite a while for the U.S. to even be in the position where it can wage such a war. But they are preparing the foundations now. So, according to Global Times, the Chinese media, a U.S. think tank released a report on Tuesday claiming the majority of experts from the U.S. and the island of Taiwan said they believe a crisis in the Taiwan Straits is likely in 2024, with a blockade or quarantine of the island by the Chinese mainland seen as the most likely scenario, while analysts from the mainland said this is an old trick of the U.S. to hype regional tensions to spread fear in the region to serve its hegemonic interests. So this is from the Center for Strategic International Studies, as I said, which covered the 87 experts and from the U.S. and the island of Taiwan on cross-strait relations, that these experts say that China has the capabilities to execute a law enforcement-led quarantine or a People's Liberation Army-led blockade of Taiwan, but fewer believed a forceful invasion was possible. Aside from the CSIS survey, the U.S. has taken concrete actions to add tensions to the region. After the Taiwan regional election, which concluded on January 13th, there have not been military tensions around the region so far, but the U.S. is planning on sending a bipartisan congressional delegation to encourage secessionists on the island. And U.S. aircraft carriers are also approaching the region, according to the U.S. Naval Institute. So there you have it. The United States is indeed preparing for a conflict. These war makers, these war profiteers, they would love to see a scenario similar to Ukraine, because it would lead to an endless boondoggle and essentially the opportunity of all opportunities to get their war chest financed indefinitely. That is what Taiwan has served as. It hasn't really served as an unsinkable aircraft carrier. There's nothing on Taiwan that could stand up to the People's Liberation Army. That's fantasy. But there are a lot of weapons that have been dumped onto the island, and they're in the tune of more than 10 to 20 billion US dollars, depending on what's backlogged and what is not. So these expose a hard fact. When accusing China of creating tensions in the region, Washington and secessionists on the island are the real troublemakers, taking concrete actions to undermine regional peace and stability, said the analyst, stressing the U.S. and its puppet on the island should not underestimate the determination and strength of Chinese military forces. Li Haidong, a professor at the China's Foreign Affairs University, told the Global Times on Tuesday that the U.S. needs tensions and fears among the regions to force its allies to stand closer with it and push other countries to take sides and rely on the U.S. This kind of trick has already ruined peace in Europe due to the outbreak of the Ukraine crisis, and Washington wants to copy this in Asia. The Taiwan Straits is its target. So according to this survey, 68% of U.S. experts said a Taiwan Straits crisis was likely or very likely in 2024, compared to 58% of those experts on Taiwan. So there are increasing intimations, indications, and I believe predictions based on a will and a desire, not simply that this is some kind of hypothesis that is based in fact. This is all driven by the United States. It's the United States that's about to send this bipartisan delegation to Taiwan as almost a signal that it believes, or in at least symbolically, that Taiwan is an independent country, which neither international law nor U.S. law even recognizes. But nonetheless, the United States is going to do it anyway. Why? Because, as I said, this war is actually coming. I don't say that to scare. I say that to just not just to warn. I say that as a verifiable fact. Lee said the U.S. is trying to hype an intensifying atmosphere around China to make regional countries believe China is going to take a massive action that will heavily impact everyone. However, China has not done anything yet, and even if China takes action, it will have been provoked by the U.S. military activities and Washington's politicians' encouragement of Taiwan's secessionist authorities. This is the truth that we need to let the world understand quickly. The root cause of the tension around the Taiwan Straits is U.S. interference in China's domestic affairs. And without meddling from the U.S., the Taiwan question, the powder keg the U.S. set in front of China, would have long been diffused in decades past, whether militarily or peacefully. China will shake off this time bomb sooner or later. On Monday, the news website of the U.S. Naval Institute reported that the USS Theodore aircraft carrier is now in the 7th Fleet area of operations as of last weekend. It means there are 3 U.S. aircraft carriers operating in the Asia-Pacific region, the other 2 being the USS Carl Vinson and the USS Ronald Reagan, according to a graphic released by the U.S. Naval Institute News on Monday, which is tracking the U.S. Navy's deployed aircraft carrier strike groups. So this is all exposing the reality. The reality is that the United States is preparing for an open conflict with China. It is sending the aircraft carrier groups. This is something the United States has claimed it is not trying to do. It is claimed that it is not trying to provoke a Cold War with China even. But all of these moves signal something even bigger than that, because if we know anything about history, it's that Cold Wars, the first Cold War, was not simply about just fortifying each side, mutually assured destruction, and with no intention of actual hot conflict. We know from many different examples, from how the United States invaded Vietnam, how it invaded Korea, how also it almost got into nuclear war over the Cuban Missile Crisis, that there was a heavy, intensive offensive posture that the United States wanted to take. And this is no different. In fact, this is probably even more aggressive on the part of the United States, because this new Cold War, the stakes are higher. And I'll tell you why very soon. So these U.S. aircraft carrier deployments show that the U.S.'s strategic focus remains on the Asia-Pacific region, prioritizing major power competition and the Indo-Pacific strategy over conflicts in Europe and the Middle East, said a Chinese military expert and TV commentator, Song Jungping. So this is what's going on. And the PLA is, of course, organizing its combat drills. There's amphibious landing ships joining up with other amphibious assault ships in a multi-course drill. This is par for the course. This is what China has been doing throughout the recent history of the U.S.'s provocations around Taiwan. But the point here is that war is coming, and war is coming in a big way. It's coming in a big way because the United States is pushing this propaganda war once again. It's not in focus necessarily. It's not in vogue. All eyes are on Gaza. More eyes are on Ukraine. But that means that perhaps the opportunity, according to these war hawks, is even greater. And the reason why the United States must do this, why it feels so committed to doing this, is because there is an economic problem with regard to China. And it's not that the China is doing poorly economically, because you can get your share of news about how bad China is doing. I mean, if we just look at, for example, Mr. Paul Krugman, the essentially completely and utterly discredited economist. He wrote an opinion article recently saying China's economy is in serious trouble. But if you read the article, this is what he had to say. He said the U.S. economy is outperforming expectations. Mind you, the U.S. economy in 2023 grew at a paltry 2%. He says that inflation is going down, but that there's no high rates of unemployment. There's no disflation. And so this falling inflation is coming at no visible cost. But he's saying that the story is different in China, and that while China has officially grown at 5.2%, it's underperforming everywhere because, democratic nations like the United States rarely politicize their economic statistics, he says. Although, ask me again if Donald Trump is in office, but authoritarian regimes often do. So there you have it. This is an economist supposedly analyzing economy without any economic analysis that gets in the way. He's not doing that at all. He's just spewing war tropes. So he says it's stumbling seemingly. He said there's deflation and high youth unemployment. It's not a full-blown crisis, but there's reason to believe China is entering a period of stagnation and disappointment. But why is it? It's because Xi Jinping's a bad leader, a poor economic manager, arbitrary interventions, that they're not addressing major issues like population and capacity and aging and stimulus. Now there's a property crisis, on and on and on. That's what Paul Krugman had to say, but that's what you're hearing everywhere, that there is some kind of economic crisis. But this is only hiding the crux of why the United States wants to go to war with China. I believe that the United States is peddling, the U.S. ruling elite is peddling this misinformation about China's economy to buy itself time as it prepares for an actual war with China. Because how do you convince yourself that things are a lot better than they actually are? Well, you tell yourself they are, that you're the one doing well and China is the one doing poorly, that China is the one who's about to collapse. Well, China seems to have a different opinion on this. 5.2%, mind you. I don't remember the last time the United States grew at 5.2% in my lifetime, mind you. Maybe I was too young to remember, but certainly not since the 08-07 economic crisis have I heard of a 5.2% number for an entire year, not a quarter, so to speak. So they have to say the Global Times, which is, I believe the paper of record when it comes to English language Chinese media. CGTN also could be considered a media of record, but Global Times is a newspaper, and it's considered the digestible tabloid of the People's Daily. So China's National Bureau of Statistics on Wednesday released a series of key data on China's economy for 2023. Among them was the attention-grabbing number of year-on-year growth of 5.2%, higher than the target set at the beginning of 2023. The actual trajectory of China's economy stands out from external pessimistic views, criticisms, and even collapse theories, demonstrating robust resilience and potential. According to estimates of the World Bank's predictions for growth rates for major economies in 2023, China's economic increment is approximately 1.5 times that of the United States and around 16.5 times that of the Eurozone. China's contribution to global economic growth is greater than the combined contributions of the Americas, Europe, and Japan, making it a leading engine for economic growth. That sounds a lot different than what the United States is saying, what Paul Krugman is saying. To be frank, the Chinese economy's recovery in 2023 was not entirely smooth. The impact of the pandemic's scar effect on the economy was larger than anticipated, and real estate sector was persistently sluggish. Simultaneously, weak economic recovery exerted pressure on trade growth and spillover effects of actions such as Federal Reserve's interest rates hikes, that's the U.S., and the appreciation of the U.S. dollar shouldn't be underestimated. The public, to varying degrees, have experienced the impacts of these domestic and external challenges in their micro-level perceptions over the last year. There were once even voices of deflation in public opinion, and opportunistic individuals outside even seized the opportunity to chant the collapse of the Chinese economy. Achieving such results in this context is undoubtedly of positive significance. It not only plays a constructive role in allowing both domestic and international observers to gain timely and clear understanding of the overall picture of the Chinese economy, but serves as a refutation of the various unfounded theories and speculations about it. Furthermore, it provides strong encouragement amid a generally lower expectations year for global economic recovery. So, but it's not just the economic growth, right? Not just the economic growth of GDP. Exports, consumption, and investment are undergoing significant changes in their contribution to economic growth. In 2023, the contribution rate of domestic demand represented by consumption and investment to economic growth reached 111.4%, an increase of 25.3 percentage points from the previous 12 months. There's also the problem of insufficient effective demand, and the combination of supply side structural reform and expanding demand needs further strengthening. But here we have investment, right? Accelerating structural adjustment and transformation and upgrading economic development. In 2023, more than 1 trillion yuan on 3 items were invested in electric vehicles, solar panels, and lithium batteries, have been exported, with investments in high-tech manufacturing services growing 9.9% and 11.4% respectively. So this is important. Not only is the economy growing at a 5.2% clip rate, but look at these investments. Manufacturing and services and high tech have grown 9.9, 10%, and 11% respectively. So that is hugely optimistic. That is much better than what Gordon Chang and what all the naysayers in the Western mainstream media, Paul Krugman, the economists, are saying. China is actually growing in key areas that truly do matter in advancing the productive forces of China and that are key to China's future economic development path going in a positive direction. That is really why the United States is at war with China. It isn't that China is collapsing. If China was truly collapsing, then the United States would just sit back. It would act like the meme sometimes you will see across social media where Xi Jinping is just watching the United States collapse, and it's just China is doing nothing in order to facilitate its collapse. That is what the United States would be doing if China were collapsing. Why would the United States need to spend so many resources on militarizing the Asia Pacific, on provoking China around Taiwan, if China were indeed in this moment of decline? But everywhere you'll see it, China is in inevitable decline. It's not going to stop. Foreign Affairs magazine, you can go Bloomberg, everywhere it's China is on the decline. China is in crisis, yet China grew 5.2% year on year in 2023, one of the most difficult years for the economic situation worldwide. And it's also growing in key areas that are the future of economic growth in general, which is high tech. High tech is the future of economic development in all respects because it is high technology that will be what addresses the problems, the issues, the needs of economies from here on forward, regardless of what we're talking about, whether it's transportation or whether it's housing, no matter what property, all of this, it's high technology that is going to be at the forefront. It's computerized technology, AI technology, all of this is the future. And so China's leading in those areas and growing at a much faster rate than the US and a much faster rate than the Eurozone. So this is why the United States is at war with China. It makes perfect sense. Why would the United States allow this to occur? It's already known that the United States is soon going to be number 2 in GDP terms. The COVID situation, the inflation, worldwide inflation crisis, all of this sluggishness happening in the world economy has slowed down China to a degree. And the Chinese media here, the Global Times, admitted that. But the enthusiasm and the optimism is still there, while the United States has absolutely nothing to show for it. There's no optimism. There's fake optimism. There's Paul Krugman saying that the U.S. is exceeding expectations and never lies about economic statistics, which is foolish if one believes that. You would have to be absolutely naive or really just a moron to believe the United States does not lie about its economic statistics. It lies and it lies and it lies. It creates measures and means tests and all kinds of other things to help cement lies as truth. For example, that the United States has a poverty rate at the number that it does. No, it has a poverty rate much higher because the poverty rate is undercounted. The way that homelessness is counted in the United States always undercounts because guess how homelessness is counted? It's volunteers going out at one point in time per year and attempting to then estimate how many people are actually sleeping on the streets or in a place that is not their home at any given moment. That is not how you measure anything, but this is how the United States does things. The United States does things by positioning itself as the exceptional one, as the one that can boast about its hubris because it is, in fact, the adversary that is falling. But all of the indications are that the United States is escalating with China around a possible war with Taiwan because it is economically insecure, because it is politically in tatters, and because it is disintegrating as an empire. So the Biden administration is going to put the cherry on top of his absolutely failed and absolutely just discredited rule, 4-year rule, by potentially, if it wasn't enough, to have set Ukraine on fire and then set the Middle East on fire once again. Well, it seems like the Biden administration is seeking to throw some kerosene on to the Asia Pacific and in particular Taiwan and to ignite that flame as well. But war may be coming, but war is not going to resolve the US's issues. It's certainly not going to resolve Biden's because the United States can't fight this war right now. They can't. The United States cannot do it. The United States military can't do it. Its Navy can't do it. It is just not going to get done in this way. So right now, what you have is essentially a U.S. empire walking on a tightrope at the circus. It is about to fall off that tightrope. It is trying to balance itself on it so that it can continue to pursue its path of war, but not fall to the floor. That is what the United States is doing. At any moment, this could ignite, this could jump off, and it will be the United States to blame for China having to forcefully reunify Taiwan to it because of the absolute aggression, the unlawful methods and measures the US takes around this issue. The US has no right to be here, it has no right to be in that region, has 3 joint communiques claiming it believes in the one China principle. But nonetheless, here you have CSIS, you have think tanks, you have Gordon Chang, and of course, you have the US military proper preparing for a war that it cannot win. I guess all we can say is good luck, but also we need to be ready to oppose this at any cost because things are about to get hairy when you have at the helm a U.S. ruling elite so desperate it's pumping out someone like Joe Biden to lead, promote, and organize unwinnable wars. And not just unwinnable wars, but catastrophic, world cataclysmic wars that could potentially eliminate the human race from the planet as we know it. That is the stakes. Those are the stakes. China's rise is inevitable. It's not going to stop. There's no hesitation. There's no fear from the Chinese side. The US is the one that should be very afraid of what it is doing. And it will be uh, up to us to continue to observe these developments. And it remains to be seen whether we can muster the opposition to stop it. But stop it, we must. All right, everybody. All right. So that's it for the stream today, I think. All right. It was a good one. So let me just shout out the super chats. We have a member, Global Prosperity, who gave a super chat at the beginning of the show. Thanks so much. We have Arlene Chambers, who just came in. It won't get done in the future either, Danny. U.S. is stretching itself far too thin. It's stretching itself too far. Yeah. No, I agree with that. I agree with that. But yet it keeps going, going and going and going. And so, what happens when you stretch yourself so far and so thin that you still take action? What happens, right? What happens when those boundaries get crossed? We've seen already in the Middle East those boundaries getting crossed. Now the United States is essentially back into a state of war, of full war. And of course, the United States is not going to do the politically unthinkable, which is to send um, significant numbers of ground forces to take care of Ansar Allah or the Iraqi resistance or what have you, because that would be politically untenable at this moment. But of course, the United States is back in a Middle East quagmire, which is really moving in a direction of further U.S. involvement, at a scale we haven't seen since it began its invasions a couple decades ago. And the United States at any moment, this is why it's important to follow this, at any moment could do the same with regard to China. And so, again, thank you to Rafa King of Clay. We asked your question. Thanks so much for your super chat again. I think that's it for the super chats. Okay. I did get a new Patreon member, Basil, as of 9:12 p.m. during the stream. So if that was you, Basil, if you're watching the stream, I appreciate your contribution to Patreon. Of course, subscribing on Patreon is the best place to support my work. Patreon.com/Dhaiphong. Thank you so much for that. Because when you support on Patreon annually or monthly, you get all kinds of perks: free PDF copy of my book, the ability to ask questions, guests, other thing, there's other perks to it as well. But really, it's just the best way to support, because it has these annual options, monthly options, and it gives me the most flexibility in producing and sharing all sorts of different kinds of content. So otherwise, though, there are other options. There's Substack. I'm having some trouble actually with Stripe right now. I need to verify my account, and they've basically locked out payments, which is very frustrating. But Substack is another way you can become a paid member, annual or monthly. You can become a YouTube member. We have some great YouTube members who come to these streams regularly, who participate, ask questions. And unfortunately, YouTube membership does not offer the most. It offers an emoji. You get recognized and noticed. That's about the most that I can do. Early notifications. I'm going to try to do some early video access eventually. I'm having some issues with YouTube, and the month of February is going to be a little slower for me in general, because I have another matter I need to attend to for that month. But you can do that. And there's also one-time options, PayPal and Buy Me a Coffee in the video description. Those are the best places where you can support my work, and I would highly appreciate it. All right. With all that said, everyone, there are a couple announcements. So as of right now, I have on deck, potentially, it keeps getting rescheduled. And to be frank, I mean, some of it's got to do with some personal reasons on all sides. But Richard Wolff is finally going to make it to the show, I believe, this coming Friday. So in just less than 48 hours, I'll have him on, I believe, in the early afternoon on Friday. I'm shooting for 12:15 p.m. start time. So look out for that, because we're going to talk about all the latest economic news, not just the contradiction between China's so-called collapse with how China's actually doing, but also we're going to talk about Russia's rise as the top economy in Europe. We're going to talk about the backfiring of sanctions, talk about the decline of Europe's economic system, of the US's economic system, the decline of the empire, talk about the rise of BRICS. We're talking about all of those things on Friday. Now, also, people are reminding me to do this because I do forget. So I want to apologize, because it's still very new to me. But Rumble, all right, I want to say hello to everyone on Rumble and everyone on Rockfin too. We have 18 on Rockfin. We have a tip from JVB and Copeland Morris. Thank you so much on Rumble. We also have, on Rockfin. we also have Rumble. Okay. Rumble, folks. We have 98 people watching there, and I'm going to pull up actually the link to my Rumble. I'll say hello to some of you folks. I want everyone to follow me on Rumble if they can, okay, or they should, not even if you can. So here is my Rumble page, okay, rumble.com/c/Danny-Dhaiphong, okay. So here I am, just search my name, Danny Dhaiphong, follow me, all my streams go there. I don't know why the YouTube videos don't really go here yet. Rumble can be a little, it's got some quirks to it, but I do appreciate everyone in the Rumble community. I really want people to follow me there. We have Carrie here from Rumble. I don't know, was it you, Carrie, who reminded me? Pulling the strings is here from Rumble. And of course, we have a whole stream going on in the chat. Yes, pulling the strings says promote and remember your Rumble fans. So there you go. Follow me on Rumble. Search my name, Danny Dhaiphong. That is how you can support this work. I don't know what's happening there. All right. So it's like I'm sharing a screen inside of a screen. Oh, I see, because I was playing it. That was pretty trippy. Pretty trippy. Well, everybody, it's about 10:30 my time. I really should be getting out of here. So be on the lookout for Friday. It may or may not happen. I am pulling for it to happen. With Richard Wolff. Oh, and then on Monday, I have Scott Ritter coming on. Okay. Scott Ritter is back from his trip to Russia, and we will be catching up. All right. Monday night. That will be what is that? The 29th? So a couple streams coming up. All right. A lot, a lot to get into. But with all of that said, good night. Is there a delay? Oh crap. Has there been a delay this whole time? I hope not. That would be a big bummer. Let me see. I don't see a delay for me. Okay, I don't see a delay on my end. Hopefully it's just your end. All right. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. Salute, of course. Salute to Yemen, salute to Palestine, salute to Russia, China, salute to the entire multipolar world. People are saying get Jeffrey Sachs on. I've been trying. I've had him on in the past. I'll just say that I've been trying really hard. I have multiple inquiries. It constantly gets lost. He's a busy guy. I will try to get Jeffrey Sachs back on. All right. Um, but it will be a little slower. Salute to all the forces in the world fighting for peace, fighting for real self-determination. Salute to all of you for viewing this, for supporting this work. YouTube has been kind of pulling me through the ringer of late. I think there really is a campaign to kind of stymie this channel. People stealing my work, all kinds of things, people, bots. With all that said, everybody, be sure to follow me on Rumble. Hit that like button on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button on YouTube. Be sure also to support me in the video description. All the links to all the ways you can support me as a paid contributor and member. All of that goes a long way to keeping this work sustainable while the war on real information, not the war on alternative media and independent media continues. Okay, let's go. Take care. Bye bye.